testing is not public policy? Testing is not public policy.
I'm not interrupting you. Let me actually get a sentence without interrupting
I think you've gotten many, sir. I'll show you the tabulation of who spoke and how much in the segment later. Go ahead.
Chris.
Yes, sir.
This pandemic has been an enormous challenge across the country. I think Democrats and Republicans are trying in good faith to keep people safe. But I think we can also have reasonable policy discussions about what works. A, to keep people safe, but B, to get people back to work. And I think people want to go back to work. You know, this week Disney announced 28,000 layoffs. Now, Disney is not a right-wing company. They're a very liberal company. But what's interesting about Disney, is they're doing the layoffs in California because California shut down the theme park. They're not doing the layoffs in Florida because Florida opened Disney World. I mean, it's a clear contrast where Democratic politicians in California have shut it down,
so
and
they're
they've
laying
cost
off the people
their
where they're
jobs.
out of business and not the place that they're in business, and you're saying that's political.
No, I'm saying the policies of Democrats to shut the economy down are bad policies that hurt people's lives.
What do you do when people are getting sick?
Result.
What do you do when people are getting sick, Senator, and you can't test them?
You don't send them
and
into
they don't
nursing
wear
homes.
masks, and you tell them not to.
You don't send them into nursing homes.
Oh, so the nursing homes was the sum total of the entire problem in the country. That's what it was.
It led to New York having 33,000 deaths compared to Texas having 15,000 deaths, and Texas has 50% more population than New York does.
And what about all the cases that they had? And how many people got sick by the refusal to shut down businesses? You say you want to open them up, but you won't discuss how. You say you introduced a bill, but you won't talk about the president and his failure. The testing has to be done at the federal level, Ted. You know this. You understand a little bit about state economics. You know the governor can't do it himself, right?
Well, actually, governors have taken the lead and have had much greater success. Texas' record on every level is much better than New York and New Jersey and Massachusetts.
That's not true. Look at New York's numbers. Look at the rate every day of testing. My brother puts it out every day. They were the hub of where people were coming. You guys want to celebrate China. You let in 40,000 people. It had already moved to Europe.
So Chris,
you let in tens of thousands of people. They went to the hubs. That's why we got so sick.
Does it trouble you at all that New York and New Jersey had the highest death rates in the country?
Of course.
Does that make you pause and say,
gosh? It all troubles me, Ted. And to watch guys like you stand by and stroke your beard like a wise man instead of telling the president to get on it when you have power.
How about tell your brother to get on it?
My brother will stand for his own record. Why don't you talk to the president the way you talk to my brother, Ted? You afraid of him? You think he'll smack you down at home?
Oh,
is that what it is? Like he shut you up in the primary?
Cuomo's. You guys
not
are really
Cuomo's.
tough.
I'm talking about the president. My brother's not the president. I'm talking about the president, the one who called you a liar, the one who said your wife was ugly. That guy. You know, the guy now who you won't say anything about.
I recognize that you actually wonder why you don't have a lot of Republicans that want to come on your show.
I have more than any other show.
And yell at me and insult.
I'm not yelling at you. I'm raising my voice to match your own because you want to play games, Ted, and people are dying.
That's okay, Chris. You're perfectly fine to scream and yell because you know what?
Oh, but you don't.
You're doing it because you don't want to discuss the substance. Like
you
invited me on the show to actually talk about the Supreme Court and talk about the book One Vote Away, and instead you just want to repeat insults over and over and over again.
Oh, but you're
Let's
not.
Actually talk about
you just bring up my brother for half the interview because you're such a fair guy.
Well,
you play it so straight down the middle.
You were just playing in a biased way, attacking
because the president's
Texas, Florida,
not at the top
and Georgia,
of the food chain.
Coincidentally, happen to be Republican states when the death rates. They are markedly worse, and we should ask, when the death rates are markedly worse in some states than others, we should ask a reasonable question.
Yeah. Why didn't the president help sooner? That's the question. Why didn't the president help sooner? Why didn't he help the places that got hit hardest first when they were all Democratic?
Specifically, was it the right decision or the wrong decision when the president halted air travel into and out of China?
Right decision. Should have done it sooner,
and
should have not let 40,000 people repatriate. Next question.
Okay, so I agree with you on that. I called for him to do it the day before he did it, but Joe Biden denounced it as racist and xenophobic.
Yes,
he did.
No, he didn't.
And Nancy Pelosi
I'll bet you
brought up a vote
I'll bet
in
you
the
dinner
House
Biden didn't denounce
for
it.
Democrats to stop the ban.
I'll bet you dinner that Biden didn't say that. You were right about Pelosi,
he
and it was a bad move. You're wrong. You're right about Pelosi, and it was a bad move.
And by the way, Chris, you know, your colleagues at CNN, this is sort of the talking point. With Jake Tapper actually read the Biden tweet to him. I don't have it in front of me right now, but He denounced it as racist and xenophobic. The New York Times, who you just had Tom Friedman on, had multiple articles saying it was a mistake. It was terrible to halt air travel into and out of China.
Well, you heard what I just said, right?
I can tell you I chaired a hearing in the Senate
hear what I just said?
where the expert so you said that, I agree with you now, but you know what?
Now,
the Democratic Party didn't say it then.
I'm not part of the
Democratic Party denounced it.
Let me ask you one other
then.
thing while I have you that I think is almost as important as what you say about when we're shutting down and when we didn't, because that's in the past. What the president said about the election, Senator, seriously now, I'm happy to joust, but not when it's existential, okay? That's why I come at you about the pandemic, because for me, I don't play politics with it. I'm a little insulted by that, but I'll make it.
You don't play politics. You just only attack Republicans over it. But you're not playing politics.
I have Republicans on all the time who are willing to come back all the time.
You attack Texas, Florida, and Georgia.
No.
Is there anything similar about those states?
Please, Senator, you sound silly. I talk about people and how they're struck in those states all the time. I care about them, and I want them to be better, and I don't want them to be sick and go through what I did. So that's why. I do it with Democrats, too. I do it with them, too. Anybody who's not doing the right thing when it comes to... I talk about the kids in class as a national problem. But let me ask you this. The president has been hinting very strongly that if the election doesn't go his way, it will have to have been fraudulent. And you just heard Tom Friedman and his concerns. If your state and the other states certified their results, as they always do, and say, no, this is it, our count's legit. We'll check as the law allows, but it's legit. And the president says, no, not good enough for me. I don't want a transfer of power. What would you do?
So that's not going to happen. There's going to be a peaceful transfer of power. But let me say something. I wish that the two political sides actually had conversations where we listened to each other. I have to admit, it was surreal listening to you and Tom Friedman talking about what you think Trump is going to do on the election, because from my perspective, I think it's projection. I think the one that is going to challenge the election in all likelihood is Joe Biden.
Biden said last night he'd accept the results.
But Hillary Clinton told Joe Biden under no circumstances should you concede defeat. And not only that, it's interesting. Tom Friedman talked about Bush versus Gore. So I was one of the lawyers who represented George W. Bush in Bush versus Gore. There's a chapter in my book, One Vote Away, that talks about Bush versus Gore and elections. And by the way, it was Al Gore who challenged the outcome of that election. It was Al Gore who filed litigation. And it took 36 days of chaos. It went to the Supreme Court twice, and ultimately it was resolved. Bush. The ballots were counted 4 times. Bush won all 4 times. And at the end of the process, there was a resolution. It's one of the many reasons why 9 justices on the Supreme Court matters, because we need a resolution. And what my book does, I'd just like to say a second about it, if I could.
I haven't stopped you. Keep talking, brother.
Before I was in the Senate, I was a Supreme Court litigator. That was my profession, was arguing cases at the Supreme Court. Each chapter in the book talks about a different constitutional right, whether free speech, religious liberty, the Second Amendment. And what I would say, look, I recognize a lot of your listeners are of a different political affiliation than I am.
But I invited you anyway, so please finish your point.
We're a big country. So my point is, if folks at home want to actually understand why so many millions of people are deeply concerned about protecting free speech and religious liberty, and how those rights in the Second Amendment, how they hang in the balance, what the book does is it tells the inside story of what's happening with the justices, what's happening with the courts, what's happening with the landmark cases on those rights, many of which I help litigate. And I do think on Bush versus Gore, for example, we could easily find ourselves in November and December and January in the midst of nationwide litigation. It could be brought by Joe Biden, or it could be brought by Republicans. Either side could bring litigation. And I would encourage folks, if you want to understand the issues more, even if you don't necessarily agree with me, I think the book is a helpful tool to understanding these issues and what's really going on at the court.
And I hope you stand by what you said about the peaceful transfer of power. I hope if you can see that there's an obvious political play, I hope you speak up, Senator, because that's why you're in office.
And I hope Joe Biden does, too. If Joe Biden loses, I hope that
he said he'll accept the results. If he doesn't, then he's a liar, and he's got to be called out as the such. Unless they can bring up a material issue on either side. Then obviously, you've got to have the system be